Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have the second part of my October wrap-up. This is going to focus on the poetry that I read in October. The first poetry collection that I read in October was The Art of Falling by Kim Moore. This poetry collection, I believe, is the poet's first, and she has certainly done the rounds. I've noticed she's judging competitions, she's talking in a lot of different places, but personally I don't think that this poetry collection was for me, which really upset me because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Kim Moore is a northern poet and I'm quite fond of supporting northern voices. I don't know whether it's because of the way that I read this poetry collection, or whether I do indeed read poetry collections wrong, but there is a way that I go about them in that I read them like any normal novel, and then poems that catch me I'll go back and reread. I may reread one over and over whilst I'm going, but it is the thorough process of I'll usually read it in one sitting and get it done that way. And so I don't know whether these poems should have been read that way, but personally I felt that they became a bit repetitive in the style and the way that Kim Moore crafts her poetry, and ultimately the poems just weren't for me. Next, I read Playtime by Andrew McMillan. This is the poet's second collection. I reread his first, entitled Physical, a few months back, and I actually prefer the first poetry collection. Once again, in a similar fashion to Kim Moore, I found the poems in here quite repetitive to the point that I actually found myself becoming a bit bored with the topics that were mentioned here. I think people go to Andrew McMillan's poetry for the style in which he crafts his poems. Indeed, for me, that is something that I still marvel at. I don't understand the meaning behind it. I don't understand why he crafts stuff in such a way. There is still a lovely turn of phrase in here, and what I'd call the almost experimenting with form is still present, and I don't know, it's taking topics that I suppose we call taboo, which is similar to what he did in Physical, and just putting them there for everyone to see. I can't say whether I liked or disliked it really, it's just somewhere in the middle. Around it requires a reread, but I got bored, so I'm not going to be rereading it anytime soon. Next, I read Don't Call Us Dead by Danez. This book won an award, and I can tell why, because this book is fantastic. From the first poem, which is incredibly heartfelt, heartrending, and it just moved me, and there's a lot of poetry within this collection that made me feel ways poetry has never been able to make me feel before. The poetry in here is discussing race, it's discussing sexuality, it's discussing the HIV crisis. It is powerful, and the poems I thought were just fantastic. It is a book that I look forward to going towards in future, whilst there are poems in here that definitely evoked a sadness within me. The actual issues people were having here were enough that I think that more people should read it, just in the hopes of feeling those emotions. The final poetry collection that I read in October is Cosmocartography by Ciaran Hodgers. I purchased this poetry collection simply because the poet is someone who went to the same university as me. We do not know each other, but I know that he knows quite a few people who were on the same course as me. I just thought that I ought to support a writer who I kind of know of. I was not disappointed. This poetry collection delves into every topic under the sun, and I believe that the poet is renowned for performance poetry and slam poetry, and you can really tell that from the way the poems are written. There is humour in here, there's tragedy, there's all the kinds of things you'd expect from this kind of poetry. And yeah, personally I really enjoyed it because I really like seeing the way that writers work with sound and experiment with sound within their poetry, so it really worked for me, and I heartily recommend that folk go out and find it. So them's the books, and somebody's arrived home, so I'd better go and make them a cup of tea. If you've read any of these poetry collections and would like to discuss them in the comments, please feel free to do so. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.